I wanted to speak about this topic, and I have to thank a brother who I will leave nameless at this time because I don't know if he wants me to recommend or suggest his name here, but he suggested speaking about this topic, which I've spoken about before, but I'm going to do another presentation on this, so thank you for reminding me of bringing up this topic again. Prophet like unto Moshe. We find this in Deuteronomy chapter 18. Prophet like unto Moses. Deuteronomy 18, chapter 18, verses 15 through 19, refers to Joshua in the immediate context and all subsequent prophets after him. Now this is, I want to say respectfully for those of you who may be watching who have an idea or a belief on who the prophet will be, I am in no way trying to disrespect anyone's beliefs or trying to argue with anyone with this video. I am simply giving the understanding of Israel on this topic in the Torah of who it is speaking about when it's speaking about the prophet like unto Moshe. To get a clear understanding from the Torah, clearly what it's speaking about. And I hope that it's clear after I'm done with the presentation. We're going to specifically take a deep look at chapter 18 of Deuteronomy, verse 15 through 19, very carefully. It's very important. I always teach this. If you do not study carefully, not just context, which is very important, and that gets missed a lot. People parachute and cherry pick verses all over the place. Again, that's not the way you study. That's not the way that you could just create any religion you want or any cult you want. You cannot do it. It must be in context. But what's more important than context is reading and studying carefully. Stop rushing your studies. You must study carefully. Every word, every letter, every verse must be studied carefully because you miss so many gems. All right, let's take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 18. Verse 15. Moses is speaking. Let's make that very clear. Yehovah, your Elohim, God, will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you. Listen carefully. Like me, or like unto me, from among you. These are 2 points, 2 valid points that we have to be careful and carefully read. Like me, from among you. Literally, the audience that Moses is speaking to. He is speaking to an audience. From your countrymen. See, again, the Torah clarifies. If you're not, if you want to argue the case, he clarifies it. Not once, not twice, 3 times. Like me, from among you, from your countrymen. And you shall listen to him. Okay, so now we need to establish the context to what it means to be like Moshe. Let's start there. In verse 18, it establishes the context concerning this particular chapter. Verse 18, God is speaking now, Elohim. I will raise up a prophet from among their countrymen, like you. Speaking to Moshe himself, Moses himself. And I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them, and I shall give him all that I command him. So what does it mean to be like Moses in this context? Simple. All that it means is that the prophet will speak the words of God, what God commands of him, very clearly as spoken by God himself. That's all. Now, what prophet do we know in the Torah, in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Scriptures, who fits this description? The answer, every prophet in Tanakh speaks the words of God in the Hebrew Scriptures. That's the definition of a prophet, speaking the words of God, that does not speak a different message than the words in the Torah, which God warns against false prophets who go against the words of the Torah and against the words of God. For example, you must look at Deuteronomy chapter 13. Chapter 13 of Devarim, Deuteronomy, there is a warning about false prophets. Now, it's interesting that the Torah does not call these prophets false prophets. Open up the Torah, read Deuteronomy chapter 13, and read 1 through 10. God warns the people of Israel through Moshe. He says he will send prophets. They will do miracles. Listen carefully. They will do miracles. They will predict the future. They will have wonderful visions and dreams. We hear that all over the place. I had a vision. I had a revelation. God spoke to me. How many times have you heard that in a story, or in a religion, or in a cult? The Torah was not given to one person. The revelation at Mount Sinai was to approximately 3 million men, women, and children. Moses, it's very critical that you understand, you the listener, it's critical for you to understand that Moses did not come down from the mountain and say, guess what? God spoke to me, and here is the Torah. That's not what happened. Because if that's what happened, then anybody would have said, well, how do I know? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. You just take it or leave it, right? But that's not what happened. It's very critical we understand. This was a national revelation. Again, Exodus chapter 19, verse 9 says, God is speaking to Moshe. I will come to you in a thick cloud, Moses, so that all the people will hear as I speak to you, and then they will believe in you forever. It's very, very important that we understand this from the get-go. This was a national revelation. This was not a private revelation, not a take it or leave it. It was revealed to the whole nation. God saying, hello, nice to meet you. The whole nation was there. All of Israel heard God speak to Moshe. The Torah foundation is rock solid. That being said, let's get back to the point of what I said. All the prophets of the Hebrew Scriptures are based on that foundation of the Torah. So what I'm trying to get back to is that all the Torah, in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Scriptures, all the prophets revert back to the Torah as the truth. Come back to Torah, come back to worshiping Elohim according to Torah. That's the message of the prophets in the Hebrew Scriptures, in the Tanakh. So if any of the prophets went against the Torah or changed one word, then they cannot be a prophet of Elohim, according to Israelite history. Period. So who does it apply to? All prophets in the Hebrew Scriptures. Let's look at some examples. We believe it's Yehoshua, first and foremost, was the first of those prophets, like unto Moshe. Joshua chapter 1, verse 5. No man shall stand up before you, this is God speaking to Joshua, all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so shall I be with you. I will not weaken my grasp on you, nor will I abandon you. God had Joshua's back. He backed Joshua 100%, as he did Moshe. Joshua chapter 1, verse 16, the next verse. We're going to read also the next verse, 16 and 17. It says, and they answered Joshua, saying, all that you have commanded us we shall do, and wherever you send us we shall go. Remember, Israelites, when Moshe repeated what God had said to the Israelites, they said the same thing to Moshe. All that Yehovah has commanded we will do, and we will heed. Same thing you see here with the prophet Yehoshua, Joshua. Verse 17, just as we obeyed Moshe in everything. See, I'm not making this up. This is right here, word for word. Just as we obeyed Moshe in everything, so shall we obey you. Only that Yehovah, your Elohim, your God, be with you as he was with Moses. Again, I did not put it in there. This is the words of the Torah itself. Joshua chapter 3, verse 7. And Yehovah said to Yehoshua, or Joshua, this day I will begin to make you great in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so shall I be with you. Very clear, explicit. There's no interpretations here. This is explicit. Joshua chapter 4, verse 14. On that day Yehovah made Yehoshua great in the sight of all of Israel, and they feared him as they feared Moses, all the days of his life. Joshua chapter 11, verse 15. As Yehovah commanded Moshe his servant, so did Moses command Joshua, and so did Joshua as well. He left nothing undone of all that Yehovah commanded Moshe. I would argue that there is no prophet in the entire scripture who is compared to Moshe, as such as Joshua. If you can show me otherwise, I'm willing to listen. I really am. With the similarities, the instructions, the trust from Elohim to him, you won't find such a thing. Now, many people will bring up Deuteronomy 34, verse 10, essentially arguing that Joshua could not be a prophet like unto Moshe, mentioned in Deuteronomy 18, verse 18, because it says this in Deuteronomy 34, verse 10, and there was no prophet who arose in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Now this could be a big stumbling block that somebody might throw in your direction. How do you respond to this? Rationally, carefully. The part that I capitalize and starred is significant in my studies of this, because it provides a different context as to what it means to be like Moshe. Compared to Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 18, compare that to Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 18. The context was simply that in order for a prophet to be like Moses, all they had to do was speak all that God put into their mouths. This fits the general description of every prophet after Moshe. However, Deuteronomy 34, verse 10 is speaking about being like Moses in a very specific manner. Very specific. So that's the difference. Why does it sound different? It is very, very specific. Exodus chapter 33, verse 11 highlights the fact that Moshe had a very unique relationship with God that no other prophet had. His ability to speak to God face to face, not physical, because Christianity will take that and run with it. Woo! Ha ha! He spoke to God face to face. See? Jesus is God. No, stop it. Stop it. Stop. Exodus chapter 33, verse 11. When Yehovah would speak to Moshe face to face, as a man would speak to his companion, and he would return to the camp, but his attendant Joshua, the son of Nun, a lad, would not depart from the tent. So Joshua was there with Moshe as well. It always refers to the presence, not physical. Not physical. Because God warns us in Deuteronomy chapter 4 that beware for your souls, in verse 16 onward, that you did not see any form when God spoke to you. Because I know a lot of people that follow and worship a man as God will look at this and go, he just admitted that Jesus is God. No, again, no. Explicit content in the Torah warns us, do not make God. Beware for your souls, your life. Your soul means the afterlife. Beware for your souls in the book of life, that you did not see any form when God spoke to you at Horeb, lest you corrupt yourselves into making Elohim God in the image of a man or a woman or an animal or a fish or the stars in the heaven, anything. No image whatsoever. God has no form. Because if he had a form, then that image would be superior to another image that is physical. That cannot be. God is all things. So therefore, this is a dangerous teaching. It's idolatrous. It's blasphemy against God, the creator of all things, to make him physical when he is not. Now again, let's go back to the context of Deuteronomy 34 verse 10. Again, it's very important that we understand how serious it is to claim that God is a man. It's not true. Okay? Another thing, Christians and Messianics want to make God into a man that died on a cross for the sins of another. This is blasphemous and horrendous. The name of Elohim, blessed be his name, the most holy name, means he was, he is, and he will be the eternal Yehovah. That's the roots of Yehovah, the name. He was, he is, and he will be eternal. He is not eternal if he can die and be a man. Therefore, he's not the eternal. That cannot be. So therefore, he's not a man. Okay, I would agree that Joshua and all other prophets are not like Moses in the context of Deuteronomy 34 verse 10. But Deuteronomy 18 verse 18 does not speak concerning this context. That's the point. It's not concerning that context. For to be like Moses in the context of Deuteronomy 18 verse 18 is simply to speak the words of God put into their mouths. Joshua and all other true prophets certainly are like unto Moshe. Absolutely. In this sense of the words of Elohim on their lips, on their tongue, to speak to Israel. Thus, they are being spoken of in the context of Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 18. We can also use the grammatical consistency to demonstrate that Deuteronomy 18, chapter 18, verse 18, does not refer to only one prophet, but rather the general concept of prophets who succeeded Moses. Let's look at the verses again very carefully. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 17. And Yehovah said to me, they have done well in what they have spoken. Deuteronomy 18, verse 18. I will set up a prophet for them from among their brothers like you, and I will put my words into his mouth. He will speak to them all that I command him. Verse 19. And it will be that whoever does not hearken to my words, again, my words, God's words, not Joshua's words, not Ezekiel, not Isaiah, God's words. They will not listen, hearken to my words. I will require it of him. I will hold him responsible for not listening to my prophets. It's a very serious sin. These verses describe the prophet like Moses, who you deem to be one singular individual. Now, namely, Christians and Messianics will say this is deemed the Messiah. Or in your case, who might be watching who believe this, it's Jesus or Yeshua, who you believe is the Messiah. Knowing this, let's keep reading on. Verse 20 of chapter 18. But the prophet who intentionally speaks a word in my name, which I did not command him to speak, meaning the Torah. Anything that goes against the Torah or changed from the commandments of the Torah, listen carefully, or who speaks in the name of other gods. The names of other gods we did not know. We only knew Yehovah, Elohim, period. That prophet shall die. Period. Verse 21. Now, if you say to yourself, how will we know the word that Yehovah did not speak? Verse 22. If the prophet speaks in the name of Yehovah, and the thing does not occur and does not come about, that is the thing Yehovah did not speak. The prophet has spoken against me. You shall not be afraid of him. He lied. So, I hope that this became very, very clear, the context of what's going on here. A prophet like unto Moshe. It refers to all the prophets after Moshe. Specifically, the first one to come was Yehoshua or Joshua. Shalom, and thank you so much for your time, and I hope this was helpful.